Every moment of anger, every surge of irritation, every time someone gets under your skin, it is not random. It is your psyche trying to speak to you in the only language it knows, emotion. Triggers are not enemies to be conquered. They are guides pointing toward the parts of you that still long for healing. When someone's behavior sets off a strong emotional reaction in you, it's rarely about them. It's about the inner wound they unknowingly touched. The mind disguises pain as outrage because it feels safer to be angry than to be vulnerable. But beneath every trigger lies a forgotten story, an unmet need, an old rejection, a buried insecurity waiting for acknowledgement. Most people spend their lives reacting to triggers, believing that the solution is to change or avoid the people who upset them. They rearrange their outer world, thinking peace will follow. But true calm does not come from controlling others. It comes from understanding yourself. When someone's words sting, when silence feels unbearable, when criticism burns, pause and ask, what is this really showing me? Perhaps the anger you feel toward someone's disrespect is actually the echo of a time you felt unseen. Perhaps the jealousy you sense when someone succeeds is a reflection of a dream you abandoned. The world mirrors your inner state perfectly. Every emotional reaction is feedback from the subconscious, urging you to integrate what you've avoided. A trigger reveals where your self-image and your shadow meet. It exposes the tension between who you believe you are and what you've disowned. When you get offended by arrogance, it may be because a part of you fears being insignificant. When you get upset by someone's laziness, it might be because you suppress your own need for rest. The qualities you most dislike in others often represent aspects of yourself that you haven't yet accepted. You project them outward to keep from facing them inward. This is why certain people seem to push your buttons more than others. They embody your unconscious lessons. When you begin to view triggers as teachers, life transforms into a classroom. Every encounter becomes an invitation to expand your awareness. The people who frustrate you are not obstacles. They are instruments for your evolution. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, what is this trying to awaken within me? This shift from blame to curiosity changes everything. You move from being a victim of circumstance to a student of consciousness. Each emotional storm becomes a portal to deeper understanding. The process requires honesty. It demands that you stop defending your pain and start observing it. When anger arises, don't suppress it and don't justify it. Simply witness it. Notice where it lives in your body, the tightening in your chest, the heat in your face, the racing of your thoughts. Stay with the feeling until its story begins to unfold. Often, beneath the rage lies sadness. Beneath the sadness, fear. And beneath the fear, a younger version of you who simply wanted to feel safe, seen, and loved. By giving that part of yourself the attention it never received, the trigger dissolves on its own. Self-awareness turns emotional reaction into revelation. The more you explore your triggers, the less power they have over you. Instead of reacting blindly, you begin to respond with insight. You learn to separate the event from the meaning your mind attaches to it. You start to realize that other people's behavior is rarely personal. They, too, are acting from their own unhealed pain. What once provoked you now educates you. Every trigger becomes a mirror, every mirror a message, and every message an opportunity to grow into a more conscious version of yourself. Anger is one of the most deceptive emotions. It convinces you that the problem lies outside of you, that someone's behavior, words, or attitude is the reason for your inner storm. But anger is rarely about the situation at hand. It's almost always the surface expression of something deeper pain that has not yet been understood. fear that has not yet been faced, or sadness that has not yet been released. You are never angry for the reason you think. The argument, the insult, the betrayal, they are only the triggers. The real source of your anger hides beneath them, buried in the layers of your past, waiting for you to notice. When someone disrespects you, your mind says, I'm angry because they were rude. But if you look closer, the intensity of that reaction often comes from an old memory of not being valued. A moment in childhood when you felt unseen. A relationship where you felt small. The present event simply reopens an old wound that never fully healed. The anger you direct outward is the body's way of saying, pay attention to what's still unresolved within. What you believe you are fighting in others is often the echo of a feeling you've been avoiding in yourself. The mind loves to build stories around anger. It creates villains, justifications, and reasons to keep the fire burning. It tells you that being right is safety, that defending yourself is strength. But this only reinforces the illusion that your peace depends on the actions of others. In truth, anger is not a sign that someone else has crossed the line. It's a sign that your boundaries within have not yet been honored. You cannot stop people from being who they are, but you can examine why their behavior shakes you so deeply. Every outburst points to an inner imbalance between what you give, what you tolerate, and what you believe you deserve. Most people live at the surface of emotion. They stop at anger and never ask what lies beneath it. But beneath anger is always a more vulnerable emotion: hurt, disappointment, rejection, helplessness. Anger is the armor that hides these softer states. It is easier to be furious than to feel wounded. The energy of anger gives a sense of power, while pain makes you feel exposed. Yet true power comes not from resistance, but from awareness. The moment you dare to look beneath the rage, you find the real cause, the unmet need, the unspoken truth, the part of you that has been longing to be seen. Sometimes anger hides fear, fear of losing control, fear of not being enough, fear of being forgotten. Other times it conceals grief, the sorrow of losing something precious, or realizing that things will never be the same. When you treat anger as a final emotion, you miss the message it carries. But when you trace it to its root, you uncover wisdom. The situations that provoke you are mirrors showing where your emotional work remains unfinished. Every argument, every frustration, every irritation is life asking you to look deeper. To understand anger, you must observe it without judgment. Don't rush to justify it or condemn it. Sit with it like a curious witness. Feel its heat without acting on it. Let it reveal what it's guarding. You may discover that your anger has less to do with what happened and more to do with how you interpreted it, the story you told yourself about what it means. You might find that the person you're angry with simply reminded you of someone else, or that their words touched an old insecurity you thought you had outgrown. Once you see this, the emotion begins to lose its grip. You are never angry for the reason you think, because anger is a messenger, not a master. It rises to bring buried emotions to light. What looks like reaction is often remembrance, the resurfacing of pain that was never given a voice. When you meet anger with awareness, it transforms from a weapon into a guide. It stops being a wall that separates you from others and becomes a doorway that leads you back to yourself. Pain often enters not through what people do, but through what we expected them to do. The deepest disappointments are born not from betrayal itself, but from the illusion that others should behave according to the script we've written in our minds. We expect loyalty, kindness, consistency, and understanding, forgetting that every person moves from their own level of awareness, not ours. When they fail to meet the image we hold of them, the mind feels violated, as if Reality itself has broken a promise. But reality never promised us anything. It simply revealed what was always there beneath our assumptions. People don't truly hurt you, your expectations do. Expectation is the hidden architect of suffering. It builds silent contracts in the background of every relationship, unspoken rules of how others should speak, act, love, or respond. We rarely communicate these rules directly, yet we hold people accountable for breaking them. When they don't act according to our inner design, we call it disappointment. But what we are actually experiencing is the collapse of a fantasy. We are not grieving their behavior, we are grieving the difference between who they are and who we wanted them to be. The greater that gap, the greater the pain. The mind seeks control through expectation. It wants to predict and shape the world to preserve its sense of safety. But life is fluid, unpredictable, and uncontrollable by nature. The more rigid your expectations, the more fragile your peace becomes. When you expect someone to always understand you, you set yourself up to feel unheard. When you expect others to treat you exactly as you treat them, you invite imbalance. Because love and kindness cannot be measured or traded like currency. When you expect people to stay the same, you resist their growth and your own. Every expectation you cling to becomes a chain that binds you to disappointment. To live without unnecessary pain is not to lower your standards, but to release your illusions. You can still value respect, honesty, and connection, but without demanding that others fulfill them perfectly. You recognize that each person can only meet you from the depths of their own consciousness. Some will love you sincerely, but imperfectly. Some will misunderstand you even when you explain yourself clearly. Some will promise stability, but offer chaos. When you stop expecting them to be what they are not ready to be, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of trying to manage other people's behavior. Every time you say, "They hurt me," pause and look closer. Did they truly hurt you, or did they simply fail to fit the picture you painted in your mind? The distinction is crucial, because when you realize that your pain comes from attachment to an expectation, you reclaim your power. You stop blaming and start observing. You see that the pain is a reflection of your own resistance to what is. The moment you drop the demand that life conform to your conditions, peace begins to flow naturally. Reality may still sting, but it no longer shatters you. Expectations are the shadows of control. They masquerade as hope, but hide fear. You expect because you are afraid to trust what will happen if you don't. You want certainty where life offers only change. But relationships are not built on control. They thrive on acceptance. When you accept people as they are, flawed, evolving, inconsistent, you create room for genuine connection. You begin to relate to who they truly are instead of who you wish they would be. That acceptance doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you no longer confuse disappointment with betrayal. You stop demanding perfection and start appreciating authenticity. The end of unnecessary suffering begins when you let go of the belief that people exist to meet your expectations. They exist to express their own journey, their own lessons, their own timing. The moment you release the need for them to validate your vision, you see them more clearly. And in that clarity, anger dissolves. Because no one can truly hurt you without your participation. It is your attachment to how things should be that keeps the wound alive. Anger is not always a sign of hatred or moral failure. More often, it is energy that has lost its way, a force that was meant to create, to move, to express, but instead has been trapped and turned inward. It builds quietly in the body until it finds an outlet, often erupting through words or actions we later regret. Anger is unlived energy, the residue of what has been suppressed, unspoken, or ignored for too long. It is passion without direction, vitality without expression, and truth that was never allowed to breathe. Every outburst of rage carries a story of energy that was denied the right to exist in its authentic form. From childhood, many people are taught that anger is dangerous, impolite, or shameful. They learn to silence it in order to be accepted, loved, or seen as good. But suppression does not dissolve emotion, it only buries it. Over time, these buried sparks accumulate beneath the surface, forming a quiet pressure that seeks release. That release may come through irritability, frustration, resentment, or exhaustion. What you call anger is often the body's cry for movement, honesty, and liberation. It is the psyche's way of saying something in me is not being lived. Beneath the surface of anger lies immense life force. The same fire that destroys can also illuminate. When expressed consciously, this energy becomes courage, conviction, clarity, and transformation. But when repressed, it mutates into aggression, bitterness, or depression. The energy itself is neutral. It is your relationship with it that determines whether it burns or builds. The key is not to suppress anger, nor to indulge it blindly, but to understand it. When you sit with it long enough, you realize it is not here to punish you. It is here to wake you up to the parts of yourself you have silenced. Unlived energy hides in every yes you said when you wanted to say no. It hides in every dream you postponed, every boundary you abandoned, every truth you swallowed to keep the peace. Each time you betray your own authenticity, a little spark of anger forms within. Over time, those sparks become flames, and those flames seek expression. That is why people often explode over small things, not because of the present moment, but because they are carrying the weight of all the moments they were not true to themselves. The anger is not just toward others, it is toward the self that stayed silent too long. To transform anger, you must give that energy a path to flow. You do not fight it, you direct it. Move it through your body, write, paint, walk, breathe, create. Let it become art, movement, or prayer. Allow it to speak through expression rather than destruction. When you turn anger into awareness, it becomes power. It teaches you what you care about, what boundaries have been crossed, what truths are demanding to be honored. Anger is not your enemy. It is your inner compass pointing toward neglected integrity. This is why spiritual maturity is not the absence of anger, but the ability to transmute it. When you understand that anger is energy asking for alignment, you stop seeing it as something to suppress. You learn to listen to it, to let it teach you where your life has gone off course. Each wave of anger carries information about your needs, your limits, your passions, and your forgotten voice. The more you ignore it, the louder it becomes. The more you acknowledge it, the more it softens into clarity. The true art lies in turning the fire inward, not as destruction, but as illumination. Use it to see yourself more clearly, to awaken the parts of you that have gone dormant. When you recognize anger as unlived energy, you stop fearing it and start learning from it. What once felt like chaos becomes a source of creative power, energy returning home to its rightful purpose, waiting to be shaped by awareness into something conscious, purposeful, and alive. Reaction is the mind's first defense against discomfort. It arises before awareness has time to intervene. When someone criticizes you, when a tone of voice stings, when a situation feels unfair, the body tenses and the mind prepares for battle. But reaction is not strength, it is survival. It is the echo of old experiences repeating themselves in the present moment. The only thing that dissolves reaction is understanding. When you understand, you stop fighting appearances and begin to see the truth behind them. The storm may still move around you, but it no longer moves through you. Understanding is the quiet space where chaos loses its power. Most people react not to what is happening now, but to what similar events once meant to them. A harsh word from someone in the present can awaken the pain of a long-forgotten rejection. A moment of being ignored can revive an old memory of neglect. The mind does not distinguish between past and present. When it feels threatened, it simply defends. This is why anger often feels disproportionate to the situation, because the emotion belongs not only to the moment, but to every unresolved moment before it. When you begin to understand this, the chain of reaction starts to break. You realize you are not reacting to others, you are reacting to your own history through them. Understanding requires curiosity instead of judgment. It asks you to look at yourself and others, not with condemnation, but with interest. Why does this person behave this way? What might they be feeling or fearing? What unhealed part of me feels threatened right now? These questions shift you from the reactive mind to the reflective mind. The reactive mind wants to win, to defend, to prove. The reflective mind wants to see. The moment you see clearly, anger loses its urgency. You no longer need to attack or retreat because you've stepped into awareness rather than instinct. Understanding does not mean agreement. It does not mean excusing cruelty or tolerating injustice. It simply means perceiving the hidden mechanisms behind behavior. When you see the wounded child behind someone's arrogance, the insecurity behind their control, or the confusion behind their hostility, something in you softens. You recognize that most human behavior is a reflection of inner struggle rather than conscious malice. That recognition doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. Because the moment you understand, you no longer take things personally. You stop internalizing the pain that others unconsciously project. When you live in reaction, your peace depends on the behavior of others. Every word, gesture, or look has the power to disturb you. But when you live in understanding, your peace depends only on your perception. You begin to see that everyone acts from the level of awareness they currently possess. Just as you have acted out of fear, confusion, or insecurity in the past, so do they. This realization creates space between stimulus and response, the sacred gap where wisdom lives. In that gap, you gain the power to choose. You can respond with clarity instead of compulsion. The more deeply you understand yourself, the less reactive you become to others. When you know your own wounds, no one can unconsciously use them against you. When you understand your own fears, you stop projecting them onto the world. Self-understanding is the foundation of compassion. It teaches you to recognize in others the same struggles you've met within yourself. The harsh words that once would have ignited your anger now awaken empathy. You see the pain behind the performance. You recognize that every reaction, whether yours or theirs, is an unhealed story trying to be heard. Understanding turns confrontation into connection. It replaces defensiveness with awareness. It transforms relationships from battlefields into mirrors. The moment you understand, reaction dissolves naturally, because there is nothing left to defend. What once seemed like an attack now appears as communication. What once triggered rage now reveals information. Through understanding, you begin to see the hidden order beneath emotional chaos, the quiet intelligence of life teaching you patience, perception, and peace. Many believe that emotional mastery means feeling nothing, that peace is a kind of numbness, that strength is the refusal to be moved. But that is not mastery, that is avoidance wearing the mask of control. True mastery is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to experience it fully without being ruled by it. It is the calm center that remains steady while waves of feeling rise and fall around it. You still feel sadness, anger, fear, and joy, but you no longer drown in them. You observe them as movements of energy passing through you, not as forces that define who you are. Emotions are the language of the unconscious. They carry messages from parts of the psyche that words cannot reach. When you suppress them in the name of discipline or composure, you silence your own internal guidance system. What you call control becomes repression, and repression eventually turns into exhaustion or resentment. The goal is not to stop feeling, but to stop identifying with what you feel. You are not your anger, you are the awareness that witnesses anger. You are not your fear, you are the presence that perceives it. This distinction is the essence of mastery, the space between stimulus and response where freedom lives. The emotionally mature person reacts instantly because they believe every emotion demands action. The mature person feels everything deeply, but chooses consciously how to respond. This space of awareness doesn't dull emotion, it refines it. Anger transforms into clarity, sadness into depth, fear into alertness, and joy into gratitude. The energy remains, but its expression becomes intelligent rather than impulsive. You stop being dragged by emotion and start dancing with it. It moves through you without leaving chaos behind. Mastery also means allowing emotions to exist without judgment. You no longer label certain feelings as good or bad, weak or strong. You understand that each emotion has a purpose. Anger sets boundaries, fear signals, awareness, sadness opens the heart, and joy reminds you of connection. When you give every feeling permission to exist, it loses the need to dominate you. The more you resist an emotion, the louder it becomes. The more you allow it, the more naturally it dissolves. Mastery is not suppression. It is surrender to understanding. To live this way requires deep self-observation. When emotion arises, you pause before reacting. You breathe. You notice what the body feels, the tightening in the chest, the heat in the stomach, the trembling in the hands. You recognize the story. The mind is trying to attach to the feeling, this shouldn't happen, they're wrong, I'm not enough. And in that recognition, a subtle shift occurs. The emotion remains, but the identification breaks. You see it as energy, not truth. You allow it to exist without becoming the character in its story. This is how emotion loses its power to control behavior. Mastery also requires compassion toward yourself. Emotional awareness is not about perfection, it is about presence. There will be moments when anger erupts, when fear overwhelms, when sadness consumes you. These are not failures, they are opportunities to practice awareness again. Every time you return to observation, you strengthen your center. Over time, you realize that emotions no longer dictate your choices, they inform them. You feel more, not less, but you suffer less because you no longer resist what you feel. The calm that comes from mastery is not cold detachment. It is warm clarity. It allows you to stand in the middle of life's storms without losing balance. You still experience emotion, but you no longer confuse it with identity. You respond with wisdom instead of instinct, with understanding instead of reaction. Mastery is the art of feeling deeply while remaining rooted in awareness, a state where emotion becomes guidance rather than chaos, where every feeling becomes an instrument of self-knowledge rather than self-destruction. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the presence of awareness. It is the quiet space between impulse and response where consciousness reveals its strength. The reactive mind rushes to defend, explain, and attack, mistaking speed for power. But reaction is weakness disguised as strength. It is the ego's attempt to reclaim control when it feels threatened. Stillness, on the other hand, is mastery, the ability to remain unmoved by external chaos while seeing things as they truly are. Choosing stillness over reaction doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming precise. It means responding from clarity rather than compulsion. Every time someone provokes you, you stand at a crossroads between reaction and awareness. Reaction arises from habit. It is automatic, inherited, and unconscious. Awareness arises from presence. It is deliberate, chosen, and free. When you react, you surrender power to the situation. You let others dictate your state of being. When you remain still, you keep your authority intact. You decide when, how, and if a response is necessary. Stillness is the space in which emotion reveals its message before turning into destruction. It is what allows you to witness anger without becoming it, to observe chaos without absorbing it. In stillness, the truth becomes visible. When you are caught in reaction, perception is clouded by emotion. You hear not what is said, but what your wounds interpret. You see not what is real, but what your fears project. Stillness clears the distortion. It allows you to discern intention from misunderstanding, reality from assumption. It lets you see that most situations don't require an immediate response. They require presence. The pause between provocation and reply is where wisdom lives. It is the difference between words that heal and words that harm, between acting from ego and acting from understanding. Choosing stillness is not easy, because the ego feeds on reaction. It wants to prove, defend, and win. It confuses silence with weakness and patience with defeat. Yet, true strength never needs to announce itself. The person who can remain still when others provoke, who can listen without the need to retaliate, holds the deeper power. Stillness disarms conflict because it refuses to participate in its energy. It does not resist, it does not argue, it simply remains. From this grounded space, clarity arises, and with clarity, truth emerges naturally. Stillness also protects your energy. Every reaction drains you, every argument, every defense, every attempt to be understood by someone unwilling to listen. You lose peace trying to prove your point, but when you remain still, you conserve power. You learn that not every situation deserves your response, and not every provocation requires your participation. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, not as avoidance, but as mastery. It is the refusal to feed what does not deserve your attention. It is the recognition that inner peace is worth more than outer validation. When you practice stillness, emotions continue to appear, but they no longer dictate your behavior. You may feel anger rising, but you do not rush to express it. And you may feel hurt, but you do not let it control your tone. You observe the feeling like a wave, allowing it to rise, crest, and fall. In that observation, you begin to understand its origin. Perhaps it is old pain, perhaps unmet expectation, perhaps fear disguised as pride. Whatever it is, stillness gives you the time to see it clearly, and clarity transforms reaction into response. Stillness is not withdrawal from life, it is deeper participation. It allows you to act from consciousness rather than compulsion. In stillness, decisions become cleaner, words become fewer, and presence becomes more powerful. You begin to realize that most conflicts resolve themselves when you stop fueling them. The world will continue to test your peace, but stillness ensures it cannot steal it. You do not need to shout to be understood, nor react to be respected. The quiet mind sees everything, feels everything, and yet remains anchored, not because it is indifferent, but because it has learned that nothing is worth more than the silence that guards its wisdom.